thank you so much for coming along to this session this afternoon. I know we're competing with wine downstairs and it's the end of the day, so I really appreciate you all coming along to this session. We're a small, intimate group, so hopefully we'll have a really interesting conversation about moving beyond accessibility and creating inclusive campaigns and products. I'm Gordon McCulloch. I'm the Chief Executive of the Research Institute for Disabled Consumers. You will have never heard of us, but what we do is bring brands together with our panel of 4,000 disabled people right across the UK to come up with inclusive solutions, understand what the problems are that disabled people face about accessing everything, day-to-day stuff, transport, shampoo, cornflakes, you name it. We try and help take away the headache of having robust insights and research with disabled people, because we know for a lot of brands it's a difficult challenge to do that. And so I'm very thrilled that we're here today with my fellow panel members to talk about inclusivity and creating brands that inspire and innovate. When we're here to talk about what happens when brands go beyond ticking a box. And I'm delighted that we've got Craig Noonan here from Every, who is Director of Brand, to talk about the work that they have been doing to try and make home deliveries and returns more accessible for disabled consumers. I'm also joined by Karen Fraser, who is a powerhouse in the advertising sector, has led Credos, is that right?
That's right.
For over a decade, and Karen is also on the board of RIDC, so by extension, she's my boss as well, so I have to be on my best behaviour this afternoon. But Karen will give her vast experience of leading inclusion and trying to make advertisers and marketing much more inclusive and open to everybody. For us at RIDC, this is not just another element of looking at how to make brands more inclusive and accessible. It's the right thing to do, but there's a business imperative to it as well. And at the moment, we're doing some research to look at our panel's views of different brands and different experiences. So we're looking at retail and we're trying to reimagine retail. So to ground some of our discussions this afternoon, I'm just going to give you two stats, and I hope and I promise that will probably be the only statistics we'll talk about today. But over 1,000 disabled people told us that 66% of them said they had to change the way they shop because of inaccessible retail experiences. If that was the non-disabled population, 66% of your customers saying they had to change how they shop because you put barriers in the way of that happening would not be acceptable. And 74% of the respondents to our survey said that inaccessible shopping experiences make them feel less valued as customers, which again is not what you want in terms of brand management and brand sort of awareness. And we think these numbers speak volumes about the challenge the 16 million disabled people in the UK face. To put another way, that's the combined population of Scotland, Wales and all of Ireland who face some barrier in either transport, getting into a shop, buying something online. So it's not an insignificant section of the population. And really what we're going to talk about today is just trying to understand about how we make things more inclusive and accessible for people. I think that's probably, I'm going to stop talking now and sort of begin to ask Craig and Karen some questions. So I'd like to kick off with you, Craig. Basically, why did Every embark on a journey to make disabled consumers have a much more inclusive experience? What drove that in the business?
So our regulator Ofcom does kind of a regular league table of parcel delivery companies. We haven't scored very well in that. There's also a very similar measure from Citizens Advice Bureau as well. And both of those actually have really key kind of measures around accessibility. And it's actually an area we've scored and underperformed against the competition on. When you kind of drill into that, I think there's a number of measures which kind of come to light, and it's clear that actually we're not kind of really delivering for consumers. And there's a quote really which kind of stuck with me from a consumer who I think was a Citizens Advice survey, and she basically said a missed delivery was a daily reminder about how useless she felt every day. And it kind of struck a chord really for us within the business. And we are going through a big transformation here. We rebranded from Hermes to Every when we kind of changed ownership. But as part of that program, there's been a really big initiative across the whole business, looking effectively at how we improve everything from the products, from the doorstep delivery experience, to just how we kind of treat our colleagues and obviously ultimately serve consumers better. So underpinning all of that really has been the work to kind of focus and look better at accessibility. And we've kind of now got a bit of a driving ambition, which is to be, you know, the leading parcel delivery company on accessibility. And that's really driving everything we do, from our brand comms through to, you know, clearly the products we're producing. And it's starting to inform some of the kind of contractual discussions that we have with clients. And we carry some weight there as well, you know, because ultimately we work with probably 1,800 of the kind of UK's biggest high street and small kind of enterprise businesses. You know, if you've ordered something from e-commerce, quite possibly you've got it, and hopefully you got it on time from us. But you know, we've got, you know, we're probably doing 800 million parcels now a year. Again, when you look into that, actually research suggests about 1 in 4 of our deliveries is going to somebody with a disability or an accessibility need. So again, how we serve people with impairments becomes an absolute imperative, because I kind of work on a basis which is, you know, those who need us most, if we deliver for them, we deliver better for everybody. And I think that is really driving a lot of the work that we're trying to do.
It's really interesting, Craig. The drivers for change came from outside rather than from inside the business. Is that sort of a fair assessment? So once that sort of motivation to bring about change, how did you go about it? How did you engage with disabled people to understand the challenges they face, but also the solutions that could be put in place? So
honestly, it's not an ad for the Research Institute of Disabled Consumers, but we did work with the team there, among kind of, you know, other kind of organisations, but really the RIDC helped us to really understand the issues, the accessibility issues that consumers with whatever impairment they've got, whether that's physical, you know, to do with dexterity, eyesight, etc., and really start to understand what is it we're not doing as a business. And actually brought about one real simple, easy change, which we introduced, which was basically just allowing consumers to actually give a preference about whether they needed a bit more time to get to the door. And that is something now we've started to kind of expand through the other products and propositions we're launching within the business. So, you know, you had to do that on every single parcel delivery you know you were getting, but actually now using that research, we've actually been able to introduce changes where you can do that at an account level, so that literally every delivery, you know, is hopefully delivered in the way you need it to be delivered. You know, so you can go and kind of maintain your independence or live your life the way you need to. But I think that research was a real kind of eye opener in terms of actually just the scale, I suppose, of how many people with accessibility needs that we were delivering to, but also just, you know, some of the things we were missing out on and not even considering. And, you know, we've done subsequent further research off the back of that, and we've actually got now a specific kind of disability consumer panel within the business, which is helping to drive further change. And we've also started to set a panel up as well with our colleagues as well, so we're starting to look differently. So, you know, it is driving kind of real innovation and change within the business. I actually met last week a couple of couriers, both who were missing arms following kind of either accidents or issues in their lives. But actually, you know, that isn't stopping them from being a courier and a delivery driver. You know, there's kind of changes made at the delivery units where they work, which enable them to kind of go about their business. But actually, it's a great kind of visual example of just some of the changes we're able to introduce, which is opening up, you know, employment opportunities within the business, but also really getting people to think more importantly about the people they're delivering for you every day.
Yeah, brilliant. There's some things I'll pick up in a little bit, but I just want to turn to Karen now. And from your experience in the sector, some brands fear getting accessibility wrong and end up doing nothing. What would you say to companies that hesitate to engage in inclusive marketing and going down the path that Craig and Every have gone down?
I think there is undoubtedly a risk of getting things very wrong, but there are many, many ways where you can get things right. And part of getting it right, and why I'm so happy to be here and talking with everybody today, is that there's so much potential and so much opportunity. Never before are there so many ways to talk to members of the disabled community about their experiences and what they want. And we're hearing from your research, that there are a great many opportunities. One example we were going to talk about today was Primark, and the clothing range, the adaptive clothing range that Primark have just launched the second tranche of clothing for people with disabilities. It meets an unmet need. There was a market opportunity there, and the clothing is really popular. I popped into the Tottenham Court Road store yesterday in preparation for talking today and chatted to a couple of the sales staff. They all knew about it. They took me directly to where it was being sold. They said that it was selling really well, and that they were really welcoming. Said people were coming in the store in order to look for it, and they wanted more. So that means better business for Primark, and I think the examples like that show that there is good business and profit to be made, and that will sustain greater interest in more accessible products and campaigns.
Great. Thank you for reminding me about Primark not being here today. We were also supposed to be joined by one of the members of our consumer panel, Masuma, who was going to talk about her experiences at the front line, if you like, as a disabled consumer, and what are the barriers and things that she faces. And one of the questions I was going to ask her, and I'll ask Craig and Karen, in your opinion, being sort of in this space, who gets it right and who gets it wrong? This is not about naming and shaming, but just when you look at it now I'll say this again. When I started this job 6 years ago, I hadn't really worked with disabled people before, and I sort of thought, well, actually, I know what the issues are. I hadn't a clue, and it became very clear very quickly I hadn't a clue. And so over that 6 years, you start to see different things that actually you just notice, like on a train or coming in here today, that actually that's a barrier and it's inaccessible. So I suppose from your perspective, being in this space now and having gone through it, who do you think gets it right and maybe who's not sort of got it quite right? But that's under the sort of caveat that this is hard to do and it requires thought and consideration. So,
I suppose if I look at it, I think there's the brands who are designing the kind of products, which you've got inclusivity at the heart, and then I think there's the brands who are doing the comms side of it and really delivering kind of creative and innovative campaigns. Mm-hmm. But actually, there's one standout organisation for me, which is Paralympic GB. I actually think that organisation, more than any other, has probably changed misconceptions about what it means to have a disability and to be inclusive. Mm-hmm. And I think actually probably the way they've worked with the likes of, say, Channel 4 and other brands has really, really driven, I think, a kind of change agenda there, and on a level, I think, I find exciting. And, if I go, who's on the top of my list to partner with, I can tell you now it is them. They're an organisation I would love to work with at some point. I just think they've kind of got people to think very differently. And I think, the reason Strictly Come Dancing can have a blind contestant win is because of Paralympic GB. They've kind of changed that whole dynamic. And I think Channel 4 as well really broke the mould when you think how much airtime they used to give, actually, to effectively a sport which was seen as a bit niche, which has now become real mainstream, and we start to know the names of athletes, quite readily. I think that is kind of the big change. But then, if you look at the brands, I think some of the work M&S have done around product design, Primark definitely, and then I think just looking at some of the purpose-driven campaigns, Nike really excite me. I think they tend to know how to push the boundaries and create a bit of controversy as well around that. Mm-hmm.
Brilliant. Nicely avoided saying anybody who's not getting it right. But Karen, from your perspective.
Echoing what Craig has just said, and reflecting on the research that we've seen, the retail access research from RIDC, which said basically everybody who with a disability has some issues with online and in-person shopping. But there are people, happily, there are people that are getting it right. We've mentioned Primark already, but I know name checks. We get Amazon, M&S and Tesco all performing very well. I think it's important to recognise that and celebrate these wins, because it will inspire others, other retailers, to say, okay, what are they doing that's so good? What can I do as well? I know Sainsbury's was another. Yeah. And then that's on the product side. I think on the comms side, it's very interesting to see brands like Diageo, and Procter & Gamble, who've thought very long and hard about their media planning and how they plan their comms to reach more people. And I've heard people like Eileen Hanna speak from Diageo. She was saying that for a very little, relatively little cost, they can adapt campaigns to make them more accessible to a great many more people, so their reach goes up and they have more potential consumers who are hearing their messages. So that again is, really positive, a very, very positive step that we can all learn from.
And I think the point you just made about looking for inspiration, looking for the good rather than the bad, is really what motivates our panel to show up to projects. It's very, very easy for them to just have a list of complaints and things that could be improved, where they bring their vast experience and vast sort of workarounds and ideas is around the solution stuff, and that's where the actual sort of magic happens and brings about change. But I think, Craig, you mentioned something about campaigns, and Karen, I'd be interested in your views about how you ensure that a campaign isn't just a one-off, but it's a longer-term commitment by a brand. And I think if Masuma was here, she would talk about it's so frustrating to see a brand come out with a deodorant or a shoe that looks brilliant in terms of advertising, but never makes it to the shelf. So I just wanted to get your perspective on how you turn that singular campaign into something that's a longer-term commitment, and Craig as well, if you have anything.
Okay. I think, again, you do really have to look at inclusivity as a kind of transformational project. So, in a way, for me, the kind of brand comms comes almost at the end. I think it's very much about trying to drive the enhancements and the service improvements or the product improvements which work for the consumer. And then actually, the opportunity then for us is how we get creative then with whatever product or proposition we're developing or producing and kind of get that to market. And I think that hopefully is what's starting to underpin our changes, which is it's one of the first conversations and we have now, which is what's the problem we're trying to solve? How do we make this more accessible? Or what are the issues consumers are facing? And then that hopefully starts to drive actually the enhancements we look at to then see about how we bring that through. And then I think for me, it isn't, the danger is you pay the kind of lip service, isn't it? Which is you do some great kind of, comms, it's really creative, it drives, kind of discussion, but actually it doesn't go any further than that. And I think that's the slight worry, which is it just becomes kind of gloss. And I suppose we've got to get the undercoat right as well.
Yeah.
That's really insightful. Thank you, Craig. And Karen, from your point of view, it's a question of authenticity around marketing campaigns. What do you think is the secret ingredients to make sure that marketing campaign is authentic and doesn't feel like a sort of tick box exercise or a one-off?
It can be very difficult, yeah. For any individual that you're trying to represent in advertising or on screen, but it goes back to the core principles of good planning and good comms, that you must talk to your intended audience and really listen to the answers that you give and develop products and communications accordingly.
We the core principles, and speaking to the users, is a slight sort of sidebar on this. We were speaking to a high-end manufacturer of kitchen goods, cookers, and we asked about their user testing and sort of who they spoke to and when they were developing the product. turned out that they only spoke to women under 50, which means men don't cook. The things weren't designed with older people in mind, with no consideration of disabled people. And I suppose you need to fall in love with the problem first before coming up with the solution. And I think certainly that's what we try and do when we're working with different brands or companies, is to try and understand the problem first. And it's really powerful and insightful, hopefully.
And from what I understand of your work with Primark, they did that and involved people from the very beginning and throughout the whole process. So there were focus groups, there was in-person fitting of the clothing, there was feedback, and there was research with the community.
Yeah, it can be a very involved process. Sometimes, I mean, if you think of us as just another research agency, but we actually are trying to create accessible research that's inclusive, that actually listens to and includes disabled people, it takes a bit longer to do. But if you do it at the beginning rather than the end, the results are much, much better, because at the end you've got to go back and fix something. There's brand reputational damage, it costs more. And as we always say, we probably should have this printed on t-shirts and work. If you involve disabled people at the beginning, it's accessible for everybody rather than thinking of just the 80% of the population.
Without doubt, yeah. And you've got a greater chance of success, and you have success, that breeds more success.
Yeah.
So that's the way to maintain things and have a more long-term commitment.
Feels like you're asking me the questions
No,
on the panel, but
I'm not.
should be the other way.
I promise you I'm not.
not.
I did like that thing you said about me being the boss, though.
Yes, you are, technically. So, Karen, it's another question. It's probably an impossible question to answer. But what's the next frontier for inclusive marketing? What innovation should brands be preparing for? It's a very contested, difficult environment for disabled people at the minute in DEI, but have you any sort of insights or thoughts on what next?
It's really hard to talk about this, and I'm sure everybody in the room is feeling the same, that within the current political context, it's hard to see what's coming next. And I'm sure we all have had moments in the last few weeks where you just thought, oh no, really, what next? But I do think there's reason to be optimistic that what we're looking at the moment, what we're experiencing at the moment, is a temporary thing. And I'm hoping that all of us will continue to keep the faith and carry on. So with that in mind, I think that the future will be more about developing what we've already started and seeing all the work that you've done evolve and gain momentum and get those positive results that can feed back into the business and inspire more. That's my hope. That's my hope. Because the people who are in power at the moment respond to better business, more profit, more money being made, and being more inclusive and more thoughtful about how you develop products and market to people helps to do that too.
Very positive, a good antidote to what's going on at the minute. And Craig, from your experiences and the delivery, excuse the pun, of a more accessible and inclusive product, what would you challenge other brands to take in terms of one action away from today to be more inclusive? What would that be?
I'm going to borrow from Barack Obama to a degree and be the change. And actually, I think maybe it's me, maybe it's the RIDC, maybe it's us as a panel of speaker not being a draw. But I think I've been to a few panels today, a few sessions, really full rooms, standing room only. I think actually the fact it's a slightly smaller audience shows you the kind of challenge ahead. And what I would say is go back, whether you're a strategist, you're a creative, you're a buyer, or you work for a brand. I think we kind of need to badger our colleagues to really take inclusivity more seriously, and really start to think about how we can change from kind of the inside out. I think there's a huge opportunity. I'd like to see I think the ad agency just as a whole as well take a greater lead here. You know, actually, you know, borrowing a little bit from kind of Channel 4 and the work it's done around Paralympics or other causes, you know, how great would it be to potentially have an inclusivity week where actually we all gave up some of our kind of ad space, campaign time to actually bring about trying to drive and kind of break down some of those barriers and misconceptions around what it means to either have an impairment or a disability. So I think you can all make a difference, and I think that's, you know, it's hard, but I think we've just got to start, because otherwise there'll be no progress. And I think actually we've already touched on just the kind of current world environment with Trump and others. I mean, you know, we've got some leaders there who it's fair to say inclusivity is not top of their agenda. You know, we've kind of got to, I would say, rebel against that and kind of fight the good fight.
That's a great rallying call to wrap up this session. I'm going to, I think, probably break some of the rules of today, but we talked about some of the research that RIDC is doing about reimagining retail. What I'd like to ask of you, if anybody's interested in telling us what your brand is doing or one of your clients is doing, grab me at the end. We'd love to talk to you to find out what is working and what you're doing. It's not about the good and bad. It's trying to understand more about what you need in terms of brands, of advice and guidance and help to make things more inclusive, or share your lessons with us. So this is a bit of a plea. I don't know that this is a standard sort of research methodology, but I'm sort of asking if anybody would like to talk to us, to tell us your experiences. That would be fantastic. I think that's probably it. We've finished on a really nice positive note. Thank you for coming along and your attention.
Thank you.